Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second part of the presentation of the encyclical letter of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, on fraternity and social friendship. Let me refresh you on this encyclical. This encyclical letter, the third encyclical letter of the Holy Father Pope Francis, is a traditional Catholic document that has roughly 43,000 words long and is divided into 8 chapters and 287 paragraphs. It contains 288 footnotes. Originally, this document is written in Spanish, although the title is Italian, and was signed by Pope Francis on the eve of the feast day of Saint Francis of Assisi on October 3, 2020. Fratelli Tutti means all brothers or all brothers and sisters. It is a social teaching of Pope Francis which aims to promote a universal aspiration toward fraternity and social friendship, especially during these pandemic times. There are 8 chapters of this, and Chapter 1, Dark Clouds Over a Closed World, Chapter 2, A Stranger on the Road, Chapter 3, Envisaging and Engendering an Open World, and Chapter 4, A Heart Open to the World or to the Whole World. Chapter 5, A Better Kind of Politics. Chapter 6, Dialogue and Friendship in Society. Chapter 7, Paths of Renewed Encounter. And Chapter 8, Religions at the Service of Fraternity in Our World. Today, I'm going to present with you a summary of the content of the second half of the document, chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. And towards the end, I'll give a brief call of this document for our time. Now let's begin with chapter 5 of the document, A Better Kind of Politics. Chapter 5 focuses on the theme, A Better Kind of Politics. The Pope proposes a kind of politics that will ensure the development of a global community of fraternity based on practice or on the practice of social friendship on the part of peoples and nations. This politics is at the service of the universal and common good, wherein the world is open and everyone has a place in it. This politics is people's politics. It practices social charity, it pursues human dignity, and integrates the economy into a popular, social, cultural, and political project. Pope Francis spells out politics that hinder progress towards a different world. He names populism and liberalism of today's politics. With these two political movements, it becomes difficult to envisage an open world that makes a room for everyone, including the most vulnerable, and shows respect for different cultures. This populism lacks the concern for the vulnerable and exploits them for its own purposes. It distorts the concept of the word people in a closed and exclusionary way. For Pope Francis, the concept of people is a dynamic and open-ended entity. People are dynamic. They have a future, and people are open to being mobilized, challenged, broadened, and enriched by others, and thus to further growth and development. The liberalism. It is concerned only for the economically powerful people. And liberalism, specifically neoliberalism, exalts the marketplace as the solution to all problems, to the benefit only of those in power. For Pope Francis, better politics puts social love first at the forefront, rather than economics. He identifies two kinds of love in the exercise of political love. The elicited love. The acts of elicited love proceed directly from the virtue of charity and are directed to individuals and peoples. The commanded love. Commanded love is expressed in those acts of charity that encourages people to create more sound institutions, most or more just regulations, more supportive structures. And for example, someone helps an elderly person cross a river. That is a fine act of charity. The politician, on the other hand, builds a bridge, and that too is an act of charity. A person can help another person by providing him something to eat. The politician, on the other hand, creates a job for that other person. That form of charity stands out in a politician's political activity. Pope Francis writes that true charity is capable of incorporating all these elements in its concerns for others. Even the Good Samaritan, for example, explained by him in the second chapter of the document, needed to have a nearby inn that could provide the help that he has personally unable to offer. Love of neighbor is concrete and squanders none of the resources needed to bring about historical change that can benefit the poor and disadvantaged. This demonstrates the need for a greater spirit of fraternity. It also shows that there is no one solution, no single acceptable methodology, no economic recipe that can be applied indiscriminately to all. Even the most scientific or most rigorous scientific studies can propose different courses of action. For charity, Pope Francis writes, is the spiritual heart of politics. Charity is the spiritual heart of politics. It is always a preferential love shown to those in great or in greatest need. It undergirds everything we do on their behalf. He goes on to say that what are needed are new pathways of self-expression and participation in society. Education serves these by making it possible for each human being to shape his or her own future. Here too we see the importance of the principle of subsidiarity, which is inseparable from the principle of solidarity. The Pope calls politicians to tend to the needs of individuals and peoples, and effective resolve to the phenomenon of social economic exclusion. Technological advancement or development can advance the cause of ending the struggle which threatened or violates human rights of people, especially the young. The Pope emphasizes that food is an inalienable right of people. It is the most basic human right that must be addressed by the political leaders. Apart from food as the most pressing issue that politicians should face and make sacrifices is the problem of human trafficking. Trafficking is another source of shame for humanity. In paragraph 190, Pope Francis says that government leaders should be the first to make sacrifices that foster encounter and to seek convergence and to ensure that there is an exchange of gifts for the common good. Politicians are also persons, and so they also are called to practice love in their dealing among each other. After all is said and done, Pope Francis writes that what is important is not constantly achieving great results, since these are not always possible. We know that we achieve something in life when our hearts are filled with faces and names. We achieve something in life when our hearts are filled with faces and names. And let us be reminded then that no single act of love for God will be lost. No generous effort is meaningless. No painful endurance is wasted. Politicians then have to place their hope in the hidden power of the seeds of goodness they sow. Good politics is a combo of love and hope, and with confidence in the goodness present in each human hearts. Chapter 6, the dialogue and friendship in society. This chapter focuses on dialogue and its essential role in creating a new culture of fraternity. In and through dialogue, the concept of life as the art of encounter with all peoples springs forth, and a dialogue happens of peoples between generations who are ready to give and receive while remaining open to the truth. People who engage themselves in dialogue recognizes the dignity of the person, respect him, and befriend him. This is summed up in approaching, speaking, listening, looking at, coming to know and understand one another, and to find common ground. Dialogue that is constructive happens between its many rich cultural components in various cultures, may it be in the popular culture, university culture, youth culture, artistic culture, technological culture, economic culture, family culture, and media culture. In paragraph 205, Pope Francis said that in today's globalized world, the media can help us to feel close to one another, create a sense of the unity of the human family, which inspires solidarity and serious efforts to ensure a more dignified life for all. The media can offer us immense possibilities for encounter and solidarity. However, the Pope warns us that we need constantly to ensure that present-day forms of communication guide us to generous encounter with others, to honest pursuit of the whole truth, to service, to closeness to the underprivileged, and to the promotion of the common good, and not to use the social media to exploit human weaknesses and bring out the worst in people. In a society that is multicultural, dialogue is the best way to realize fraternity. The dignity of others is to be respected in all circumstances and be treated differently, since they possess an intrinsic worth, and that every human being possesses an inalienable dignity. Pope Francis pictured out an image of a multifaceted polyhedron created from a life of dialogue, an image like a diamond. It shows different sides forming a wonderful unity. The whole is greater than the part, so to speak, and the image of Polyhedron can represent a society where differences coexist, complementing, enriching, and reciprocally illuminating one another, even amidst disagreements and reservations. We can learn something from each other, for no one is useless and no one is expendable. From the image of a polyhedron comes out the concept of life as the art of encounter with everyone. With everyone, this includes those who live in the peripheries. In our case, we have the Lumans. According to the Pope, we can learn something from them, for no one is useless and no one is expendable, he said. No one is useless and no one is expendable. From the image of, a particular note made by Pope Francis is the reference to the miracle of kindness. Kindness is an attitude that we need to be recovered in these trying times. We can choose kindness. We can choose kindness. Those who do so become stars shining in the midst of darkness, the Pope said. Kindness frees us from the cruelty. Kindness frees us from anxiety, from the frantic flurry of activity that prevail these days. Kindness cultivates a relationship that does not offend any word or deed. It concerns one to be open to alleviate burdens. It involves speaking words of comfort, strength, consolation, and encouragement, and not words that demean, sadden, anger, or show scorn. It entails esteem and respect for others. And once kindness becomes a culture within a society, it transforms lifestyles. It paves the way to a new path of life, the Pope writes. Chapter 7, Paths of Renewed Encounter. In this chapter, Pope Francis outlines some ways to move forward toward lasting peace. He underlines that peace is connected to truth, justice, and mercy. In paragraph number 227, Pope Francis said that the truth is an inseparable companion of justice and mercy. And these three, truth, justice, and mercy, being linked to each other and cannot be altered, are essential to building peace. In order to achieve lasting peace, true reconciliation is key, Pope Francis explains. As he begins chapter 7, Pope Francis said that there is a need for paths of peace to heal open wounds. He also said that There is also a need for peacemakers to work and to initiate processes of healing and renewed encounter. Renewed encounter does not mean returning to a time prior to conflicts and nothing more. Renewed encounter is a return to the experience in order to learn how to cultivate a penitential memory. Cultivating a penitential memory is the acceptance of the past in order not to cloud the future with regrets, problems, and plans. Returning to the past requires enduring commitment and patience as one seeks for truth and justice, to honor the memory, and to share hope. The desire for vengeance as one visits the past does not prove or pave the way to true renewed encounter. The desire for vengeance as one visits the past does not pave the way to true renewed encounter. What leads to true renewed encounter is the truth that leads to reconciliation and forgiveness, not revenge. True peace can be achieved only through striving for justice, pursuing reconciliation, and mutual development. This means that people get to work together side by side in pursuing goals that benefit everyone. We should never devalue others for what they said and done. We should value them for the promise that they embody, a promise that always brings, or a promise that brings with it a spark of new hope. In the building of a country's social peace is an open-ended endeavor, a never-ending task that demands the commitment of everyone. Divisions must be overcome without losing one's identity. Those who work for a tranquil social coexistence should never forget that inequality and lack of integral human development make peace impossible. Those who work for a tranquil social coexistence should never forget that inequality and lack of integral human development make peace impossible. If we have to begin anew, it must always be from the least of our brothers and sisters. Some people prefer not to talk about reconciliation. They think that conflict, violence, and breakdown are part of the normal functioning of a society. It should be noted that forgiveness and reconciliation are central themes in Christianity and in various ways in other religions as well. Jesus never promoted and openly condemned violence or intolerance. Instead, he teaches us to forgive. Calling for forgiveness does not mean renouncing our own rights when confronting corrupt officials, criminals, or others who would debase our dignity. It is no easy task to overcome the bitter legacy of injustices, hostility, and mistrust left by conflict. It can be done only by overcoming evil with good. Authentic reconciliation is achieved in conflict, resolving it through dialogue and open, honest, and patient negotiation. Those who have endured much unjust and cruel suffering should not be asked to offer a sort of social forgiveness. Forgetting is never the answer, for we can never move forward without remembering the past. Those who truly forgive do not forget, but they choose not to yield to the same destructive force that caused them so much suffering. This does not mean impunity. Justice is properly sought solely out of love of justice itself and out of respect for the victims, as a means of preventing new crimes and protecting the common good. On war, which arises due to conflict, war is the negation of all rights and a dramatic assault on the environment. If we want true integral human development for all, we must work tirelessly to avoid war between nations and peoples. We can no longer think of war as a solution. It is very difficult to invoke the rational criteria elaborated in earlier centuries to speak of the possibility of a just war. Never again war. The goal of ultimately eliminating all nuclear weapons becomes both a challenge and a moral and humanitarian imperative. The death penalty is inadequate from a moral standpoint and no longer necessary from the standpoint of penal justice. It is simply inadmissible. The Church is firmly committed to calling for its abolition worldwide. A life sentence is a secret death penalty. The Chapter 8, Religions at the Service of Fraternity in Our World. This is the last chapter, the final chapter of Fratelli Tutti. In here, Pope Francis affirms the important role of the different world religions in cultivating universal fraternity and social friendship. He said that the different religions contribute significantly to building fraternity and defending justice in society. For different religions have the capacity to establish friendship, peace and harmony, and to share spiritual and moral values and experiences in a spirit of truth and love. And this is done through a dialogue among world religions. Humanity by itself, living in a civic society, cannot establish fraternity. We share in an ultimate foundation that human efforts and reason are enlightened by the transcendent truth that we are all children of God, and apart from God, our strife is not enough. Collaboration among religions, which acknowledges the dignity of human persons, acts for the common good and the promotion of the poor. Human persons possesses a transcendent dignity that by their very nature, the subjects of rights that no one may violate. Our witnessing to God benefits our societies. Seeking God with a sincere heart help us to recognize one another as traveling brothers and sisters, companions. On the other hand, the Fratelli Tutti reflects on the role of the Church. It says that the Church does not restrict her mission to the private sphere. On the contrary, she cannot and must not remain on the sidelines in building of a better world or fail to reawaken the spiritual energy that can contribute to the betterment of society. While not engaging in politics, she does not neglect the political life of the people under her care. She should stand in attention for the common good and concern for integral human development. She doesn't compete with the political leaders, but she cares to offer herself as a family among families that is open to bearing witness in today's world. open to faith, hope, and love for the Lord and for those whom He loves with a preferential love. She is a home with open doors that welcomes all in her care. Imitating Mary, the mother of Jesus, she serves and goes to where the people are in order to accompany life, to sustain hope, to be the sign of unity, to build bridges, to break down walls, to sow seeds of reconciliation. The Church esteems the ways in which God works in other religions and rejects nothing of what is true and holy in these religions. As Christians, we are identified with the gospel of Jesus Christ, where human dignity and fraternity springs forth. From that wellspring inspires our manner of thinking and our manner of doing in the Church. The primacy given to relationship, to the encounter with the sacred mystery of the other, and to universal communion with the entire human family as a vocation of all. Called to take root in every place, the Church has been present for centuries throughout the world. For that is what it means to be Catholic. The Church can thus understand from her own experience of grace and sin the beauty of the invitation to universal love. The Pope continues to say that our concern is for all things that are human. Wherever the councils of nations come together, he said, to establish the rights and duties of men and women, we are honored to be permitted to take our place among them. And we have a mother who journeys with us. Her name is Mary. Having received her universal motherhood at the foot of the cross, she cares not only for Jesus, but also for all of us, her children. In the power of the risen Lord, she wants to give birth to a new world, a world where all of us are brothers and sisters, where there is room for all those whom our societies discard, and where justice and peace are resplendent. The Pope reminds us that fundamental human right must not be forgotten in the journey towards fraternity and peace. This fundamental human right is religious freedom for believers of all religions. Given this freedom, we can build harmony and understanding between different cultures and religions. We can share many important things. With this freedom, it is possible to find a means of serene, ordered, and peaceful coexistence, accepting our differences and rejoicing that as children of the one God, we are all brothers and sisters. Freedom must be guaranteed to Christians living as a minority group. Non-Christians, where they are a minority, must be treated the same. Since the important things we share are so many, it is possible to find a means of serene, ordered, and peaceful coexistence, accepting our differences and rejoicing because, as children of the one God, we are all brothers and sisters. In paragraph 280, the Pope expresses that we ask God to strengthen unity, a unity enriched by differences reconciled by the working of the Spirit. Each has a contribution to make, yet globalization lacks the prophetic and spiritual contribution of unity among Christians. We have the duty to offer common witness to the love of God for all people by working together in the service of humanity for unity. A journey of peace is possible between religions. The point of departure must be God's way of seeing things. God does not see with his eyes. God sees with his heart. We believers are challenged to return to our sources of faith in order to concentrate on what is essential. That is, the worship of God and love of our neighbor. Otherwise, some of our teachings will be taken out of context. It will end up feeding forms of contempt, hatred, xenophobia, or negation of others. The truth is that violence has no basis in our fundamental religious convictions, but only in their distortion. Sincere and humble worship of God bears fruit not in discrimination, hatred, and violence, but in respect for the sacredness of life, in respect for the dignity and freedom of others, and in loving commitment to the welfare of all. Religious convictions about the sacred meaning of human life permit us to recognize the fundamental values of our common humanity, values in the name of which we can and must cooperate, build and dialogue, pardon and grow. This will allow different voices to unite in creating a melody of sublime nobility and beauty, instead of fanatical cries of hatred, Pope Francis said. For religious leaders, they are called to be true people of dialogue, to cooperate in building peace not as intermediaries, but as authentic mediators. Each one is called to be an artisan of peace, by uniting and not dividing, by extinguishing hatred and not holding on to it, by opening paths of dialogue and not constructing new walls. In the last paragraph, number 289, Pope Francis makes an appeal for peace and justice and fraternity. Pope Francis has declared this with the Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyib in his meeting with him. Religions must never incite war, hateful attitudes, hostility and extremism, nor must they incite violence or the shedding of blood, he declared. These tragic realities are the consequence of a deviation from religious teachings. They result from a political manipulation of religions and from interpretations made by religious groups who, in the course of history, have taken advantage of the power of religious sentiment in the hearts of men and women. God the Almighty has no need to be defended by anyone and does not want His name to be used to terrorize people. Now, what is our call today? Fratelli Tutti calls for a worldwide response, both for political leaders of each nation and their people who they serve. It calls also for a response both for the leaders of world religions and their followers. Yet, we cannot stop from there and watch like spectators. We in the Philippines must start making our own response. If we have responded already, nourish and share this response. We must consider rebuilding our nation. We must rebuild our nation from the horrific havoc of COVID-19 pandemic and the political governance that lacks willpower, transparency, and coordinated ways of lessening the negative effects of the pandemic and providing the needs of the frontliners and the poor who are the worst hit of this health emergency. This COVID-19 time bomb is deleting our good ecosystems, morals, and faith from thriving, and it is wiping out truth, our meaning and purpose in life as individuals and as a nation. we start rebuilding and healing our country. May 14, 2022 elections is a great opportune time to be together as brothers and sisters, electing public officials who promote unity, fraternity, and friendship. We pray harder and harder this time. I'd like to close this talk with an ecumenical Christian prayer written by Pope Francis in the Fratelli Tutti. O God, Trinity of love, from the profound communion of your divine life, pour out upon us a torrent of fraternal love. Grant us the love reflected in the actions of Jesus, in his family of Nazareth, and in the early Christian community. Grant that we Christians may live the gospel, discovering Christ in each human being, recognizing him crucified in the sufferings of the abandoned and forgotten of our world, and risen in each brother or sister who makes a new start. Come, Holy Spirit, show us your beauty reflected in all the peoples of the earth, so that we may discover anew that all are important and all are necessary, different faces of the one humanity that God so loves. Amen.